Hi, it's Helen with So Kind of Wonderful. Thanks for joining me today. Today we are working on month 3 for the Sedona Quilt Along. We are working on the Desert Bloom block, and it is this block. This is a fun block. It has just 4 petals and a center to it. So let's get started working on the cutting and sewing for this block. So the first thing we need to do is we need to cut some curves on this A piece. So this is 3.5 by 5.5 shapes. I have 4 of them layered here because there's 4 petals in the block and I can cut all 4 at once. I'm going to position my QCR mini ruler on the fabric, and I'm lining it up so that the right edge of the fabric is here on the 3/4 inch mark on the ruler, meaning 3/4 inches from this edge. And then the top and bottom are centered between 1 1/4 and 6 3/4 here. And then I'm going to take my regular rotary cutter and cut in the curve cutout. And then those pieces that side is cut. And now the easiest thing is just to rotate your block, and you're going to set up the next cut exactly the same way. Just position the fabric under the ruler, line up all of your marks again, so 3/4 here, 1 1/4, and 6 3/4 on the bottom edge. Take your regular rotary cutter and again cut in your curve cutout. And this is your A piece, and I have 4 of them. And it doesn't matter if they're right side up or right side down because it's a symmetrical shape. Okay, now I have my background, and this is a 5 3/4 inch square that I'm cutting in half diagonally. That's the first step. And I'm just using my QCR mini ruler as a straight edge. That's the great thing about it. We can use the curved part or the straight edges. This gives me these triangles. Now, the instructions tell me to trim 3/4 inch off each point. So there's a couple ways you can do this. Here, I've lined it up with my cutting mat, and I can measure over. I put the right angle on the grid. And I can measure 3/4 inch off this end and trim it here, and then I'm using my grid on my mat, and I'm just going back 3/4 of an inch and lining up the other side. Or let me show you another little trick. Here's the other side of the stack, and this time I'm just going to use my ruler, and the ruler is 5 inches wide. And I'm going to line up the edge of the ruler with the edge of fabric, and then the bottom edge of the fabric is on the 5 inch line. And then I'm going to just cut off the tips that are extending on each side. And that's another way you can get those tips cut off. Now our next thing is we look at this point here and here, and we position those points underneath our curve cutout in our ruler. And I'm also lining up the edge of fabric right here with the 2 inch line on the ruler. And then I'm looking at both ends and making sure that they're centered between these dashed lines on the ruler. Now I take my rotary cutter, cut in my curve cutout. This is your discard, and this is your B piece. We'll do that one more time. Again, I'm lining up the fabric with the 2 inch mark on the ruler, centering the ends, and cutting in my curve cutout. So now I have my A here, and my B, and we're going to sew a B onto each side of the A. Okay, for sewing, I'm just going to pick two, and 1A and 1B. And for sewing, we always sew with the concave on the bottom. So here's our concave. I'm going to start here and sew down. So this is the convex, and it flips over. And the pattern tells you to leave a 1/2 inch tail here. I'm actually going to leave more of a 3/4 inch tail. I feel like it centers this piece on this one better. So if you want to make that note in your pattern, I made a note in mine to change the 1/2 inch to a 3/4 right here. So it's like that, and then we're going to go sew this curve. Okay, here I am at the machine. I have it set up. I'm just going to sew a couple stitches. This anchors the two pieces of fabric together. I'm going to hold one in each hand, and as it feeds, I bring them together. Right here is what I'm watching, as it feeds under the presser foot. I'm really trying not to pull on either one, just bringing them together. And then you should have about the same amount on this end as when you started. And there's our nice curve. We don't have any puckers in it. Turned out really well. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to sew a B. So now this is my concave. So here's my block. It just flips over. Leave a 1/4 inch tail like that, and go ahead and sew that seam. All right, here I have my A and my 2B pieces. They're all sewn together. I went ahead and pressed. Press towards your A piece. I press on the back first. I do use steam. It helps with bias. And then I turn it over and press on the front. And now I'm going to go ahead and finish the rest of these. Here's our block. It's been pressed. Now we need to trim these ends off and get them even with our A piece. I'm going to use my QCR mini ruler, and I'm lining up the edge up here with the edge of this A in the middle. And then I just have my 2-inch line lined up down here on the same point. It helps keep things square so I don't have a wonky cut up here at the top. And then I rotate the piece. And now I position my ruler. Again, line this up. But now you can look at the bottom edge and line it up with the marks on the ruler to help you make a straight cut. And cut. And now you have your AB piece all trimmed up. So we have all 4 of them here trimmed. And then we have a couple more sewing to do. So we have some background pieces I have cut. Those get sewn onto one end. And then the center of my little block, I made them all the same. We'll sew that onto this end. So this is just a simple flip and sew. You just center that on the piece, sew a straight 1/4 inch seam. I'll do that to both sides and I'll press those open. Here are my desert bloom blocks put together. And I pressed them. I didn't press the seam open, I just pressed the triangles out. And they look fairly wonky, but we always square up our blocks. So that'll be our next step. We are going to square these to 5 inches. And the booklet, the Sedona pattern on page 7, gives you a couple square up tips. It shows you how to do it with the QCR mini ruler. So let me show you that first. First thing we're going to do is look at the ruler, and we're going to put some marks on the ruler. I'm using this gold Sharpie. It helps show up on the ruler. And the pattern says to put some marks at the 1 3/8 from the point. So I'm just here at the point. I'm going to go back this way, 1 3/8. So here's my 1 and then my 3/8. Putting a mark. It's hard for you to see. Let me make it a little bigger. Then I'm going to do the same thing, go down 1 3/8. And then I find my 5-inch mark, which is the edge of the ruler and the 5-inch line down here, and go back 1 3/8 and put a mark, and then go up 1 3/8 right here. So let me find something that will show the marks too. So there you can see the marks. There, and then up here on this end. So the first thing I do is position your block with this, one of your setting pieces at the top right, and this is because I'm right-handed. And then now you're going to center your block. And these dots just help you get it centered. So what I'm looking at is I'm putting the dotted diagonal clear right through the middle of the block. And then mine are actually closer to 1.5 than 1 3/8. And that mark is on the ruler. And what I'm looking at is I'm putting my setting seam right on that 1 3/8 or 1.5, depending on how you sew. Yours could be anywhere between that. And then I'm also looking down here at this end and make sure your setting seam is close to that 1 3/8. Mine is really the 1.5. So everybody sews a little bit different. Now trim 2 sides. Rotate your block 180. This time just line up your trimmed edges with your 5-inch marks. So here and here. And you don't have to look at the dots. You already centered everything the first time. Trim whatever is left. And here you have your block all squared up. Now we're going to do that one more time, but this time I'm going to use the Sew Square 6. So the Sew Square 6 we have Sew Square 6, 8, and 10 that we made some square up rulers, and then we added extra lines on them for some of our blocks. This is one of the blocks that you can use it for, and it has a B line on the ruler. Let me show you. So there is a B line. It's this first diagonal line, and then this one is A. So depending on what block you're making, we'll tell you which one to use. So this is the B line. Again, I'm centering my diagonal in the middle of this A portion, and then the B line sits really close to the setting triangle seams on each end. You can see it really well here, and I have about the same distance from it up here. Now check, am I going to get 5 inches? Go ahead, rotate my block, and then this time I just line up trimmed edges on the 5-inch marks and trim whatever is left. And now these will line up. And the reason for that is you want this point here to line up when you sew your blocks together. So I'll go ahead and square up the rest of those. Okay, here my blocks are sewn, and I've squared them all up, and I've laid them out. Here I'm just playing with layout. I know I'm going to have to add some extra background on the sides to get this the width of my little table runner, but I think it's looking great. Here I just need to decide. So here I can flip these, and I could totally have this a little bit different layout. Or I could just go ahead and make the 2 desert bloom blocks like it shows in the pattern. But whatever you decide, it'll look great. So I'm going to go ahead and sew those together and press my seams open. All right, here is my desert bloom block all sewn together. I'll show you the back. I press the seams open. It just helps manage the bulk right here. But it looks great, and it's really fun to make. So I hope you enjoyed that little mini tutorial on the desert bloom block of Sedona pattern with So Kind of Wonderful.